Hello everyone, my name is Rachel Pardo and I'm a collections assistant at the Museum of Gloucester. This is a training video on how to handle collections safely. There are many occasions when we might accidentally damage collections, but if we follow good collections handling practices, we can keep those to a minimum. One way to do this is to reduce the amount of handling we have to do and to only move objects when it's absolutely necessary. Generally, when we handle an object, we would wear a pair of nitrile gloves. The reason we do this is so that the sweat and the dirt and the oils on our hands don't get transferred to the object, and that any hazardous substances on the object don't get transferred onto us. When the gloves are dirty, it's time to change them. It's important to get the right size of gloves, not too tight so that it's uncomfortable, but you mustn't have them too loose, otherwise that would mean you can't grip things as carefully. We generally recommend wearing nitrile gloves for handling all objects, but there are a few exceptions. One is with shiny glazed objects and glass, where we might accidentally drop them because the object's slippery and we can't get a good grip. The exception to this would be if the shiny object we're going to handle actually had gilt on it, because the oils in our fingertips damage the gilt, corrode it, and so we would need to wear gloves if the object had gilt on it. Another time that we wouldn't wear gloves is if we're handling paper objects. We would just use clean, dry hands. This is because if you're handling paper objects, it's important to be able to feel them. If they're fragile, you don't want to put too much pressure on them, and that's much easier to do if you're not wearing gloves. The other way I've prepared for handling objects is by not wearing any jewellery. So I haven't got any rings, bracelets, watch, nothing dangling like a lanyard or a necklace. Anything like a watch or a ring or a belt can capture the objects that you're handling and moving and damage them. Even something like a loose sleeve is dangerous, because if you reach over an object, if you've got a floppy sleeve, you might catch it and knock the object over or break it. It's about minimising risk and taking care. It's very important to take your time, so whenever you're handling an object, don't rush. Take time to look at the object and to consider its weak points and vulnerabilities. If you're moving something, always have a clear, safe space to move it to, and make sure that the route you're taking is safe and clear. It's all about planning and taking time. Before we handle an object, we need to have a good look at it, to assess it. We're going to look at it to look for areas of weakness, and you might want a magnifying glass to help you do this, so you can have a really close look at the condition of the surface of an object. We're now going to look at a few different objects together and see where they might be vulnerable and how we might best handle them. Here we have a fabric-covered box, and you'll definitely wear gloves for this because it's got gilt thread running over it and metal objects inside. An area of weakness is the hinges. They're always fragile, and you would never want to lift anything just by its lid because the lid could come off. It's a good idea to pad the lid if you're wanting to leave it open so that you're not putting any strain on the hinges. Inside are lots of smaller objects which we would want to check for vulnerabilities. This one here, for example, the lid has completely come off, so we'll check every object. We would remove these glass bottles before moving this box because they are loose and might get damaged. So we will put them into a separate tray that is padded with acid-free paper and move those that way. Before you take anything out of a box like this, you would want to take a photograph so that you would know where to put things back. So when it comes to lifting this box, you would hold it from the base and support the sides. Here we have some photographs. The surface of photographs is very easily damaged by fingerprints. So if we were actually handling the photographs directly, you would wear gloves. But here they're in archival sleeves, which makes it much easier to handle and protects them completely. I mentioned objects that have got gilt on earlier. So this object has been painted with gold paint, and so I'm going to handle it with gloves so that my fingertips don't do any damage to the gilt. If you're handling framed objects, you need to support it at the side and at the base. Don't ever pick up a framed object from the top, because if the frame is weak, it will collapse and the glass will slide out and shatter. You also need to keep the glass towards you, so make sure that you don't have anything with a zip on, which would scratch the glass. Obviously, you need to be very careful with the glass. Some pictures are framed with art glass, which is very robust, but many will be framed with ordinary glass, which can obviously shatter very easily. If the picture is heavy, you may well need 2 or more people to move it, and you might also like to use some heavier duty gloves that give you a better grip. As ever, make sure the route you take is clear and that doors are opened in advance. Now we come on to paper objects. We have a box of them here. It's a nice acid-free storage box, and these are kept in a mixture of acid-free tissue paper and Melanex sleeves, like we saw earlier with the photographs. Because I'm handling paper, I'm not wearing gloves. I've just got clean, dry hands, so that my fingers are more sensitive for holding the paper. I've only got very smooth ring on. I haven't got anything chunky or scratchy, and I'm not wearing nail varnish, which might leave residues behind on the paper. And when I say clean, dry hands, I've washed them in soap. Hand sanitizer, so great against COVID, is not good for paper objects. And if you're thinking in COVID terms, soap is just as effective for battling the germs. Also, you mustn't use any sort of hand cream because it's too oily. So it's just clean, dry hands washed with soap. So when holding and lifting paper, you need to hold it as flat as possible. So I'm going to put my hands underneath, but also make sure you hold the sides, because if there's a gust of wind or anything, you don't want the document to fly off your hands. It's important to hold the document firmly enough so that you have got it safely, but not too firmly. So a gentle hold so that you're not damaging the object. And it's very important to take your time so that you're always holding the object properly. When moving a document, the best way to do it is to put it down on a piece of acid-free foam board and make sure all the time you're holding it flat and that you've secured the edge of the document or the Melanex that it's in so that it doesn't blow away, and then carry it close to you and put it down in a safe place. If you need to turn your document over, the safest way of doing it is to put another piece of acid-free board on top, so you've made a sandwich, and then turn it over, and then you can see the reverse side. Here we have a ceramic object. It's glazed, so I'm not going to wear any gloves because that would make my grip slippy and that would be dangerous. And that also goes for glass as well. There's no gilt on it, so I don't need to wear gloves for that reason. Also, it doesn't have a loose top or anything, which I would need to remove and move separately. So I'm going to pick it up from the base, supporting the side so that I've got a good grip on it, and then I will hold it next to my body for moving. If you're moving very fragile or broken objects, you need to take special measures. Here we have a glass bottle, which is very broken, and you'll notice, even though it's glass, I'm wearing gloves. That's because the process for tinting glass means that sometimes the colours can come off. If you, with the oil on your fingers, the colour can be removed. So even though it's glass, I'm wearing gloves. Also, that is to protect my fingers from the obvious hazard of the broken glass. The lid is loose, so you need to be careful of that. But I am going to leave it in there while I put it into this box. And this is how we move fragile objects. We will pad out a box to support it, meaning that it's much better protected than if you were just carrying it in your hands. So the box has been padded with lots of puffs of acid-free tissue, and it's been lined with bubble wrap. And I'm going to put the bottle in there. I'm going to remove this loose cork and put it in afterwards. So I'm going to hold it as usual from the base, supporting the side, and put it as gently as I can into the box. Put the cork in. And you can see it's very safe now for carrying and moving. As this is just going to be moved, we would take it like this. If it was going into storage, we would of course pad out the top with lots more acid-free paper and put the lid on. Because the object is hazardous, we would want to mark the box to say that it is a hazardous object and there is danger to the person who is going to be carrying it. When you're looking at objects and assessing them before you handle or move them, you will be looking very closely to look for any vulnerabilities or weakness or damage. And it's a good time to check for any signs of pest infestation. Because if you find that an object has been damaged by pests, it will be likely to be very weak, fragile, and it might collapse on you, damaging both you and the object further. So look out for signs of holes in wood or damage to fabric, and report anything that you see to a member of the collections team. If you see any signs of pest damage, it's very important to report it to a member of the collections team before you move an object, so that the object and you are not at risk, and the collections team member will make an assessment and make sure that the object is put somewhere safe, so that there is no contamination of other parts of the collection. Before moving any object, you must very carefully check its condition and also ask a member of staff if there is a condition report for the object, because that should alert you to any weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the object. To summarise then, you must always hold an object by the strongest part, never by a handle or a spout or a lid, and use both hands Hold from the base, hold underneath, and hold at the sides. And keep it close to your body when you're moving, because that's the most stable place. If something is in more than one part, or it's got a loose part, remove that and move that separately. If it's fragile or there are lots of parts, move it in a box packed with appropriate materials, the acid-free tissue puffs and things like that. Be aware of hazards in advance, so plan the route that you're going to take, make sure it's clear, make sure that other people in the building know what route you're going to take. If it's a heavy object, consider using help, having help. You might need 2 or more of you to move something. Always remain calm. If you have any questions, ask a member of the collections team, and always take your time. Never be hurried. Be calm. Thank you.